our next speaker flew all the way from Brazil. That's a long flight to tell you some great talk about values and quality in software engineering and how it's indeed everyone's responsibility. Please welcome Thayse Onofrio.
Hello, everyone. I'm Thayse. Thank you all for joining after lunch. I know it can be hard. I'm going to talk about why software engineers should make quality a priority and the benefits of shift-left testing. So to start with, let me introduce myself. I'm Thayse Onofrio. I'm a lead software engineer at Thoughtworks back in Brazil. I'm from Brazil, and I live there in the south of Brazil. So yeah, it was a long flight to get here. It is my first time at Budapest, my first time at CraftConf, and yeah, very excited to be here, enjoying the conference a lot. You can find me at thayseonofrio.com, where I blog sometimes, and my LinkedIn is also Thayse Onofrio. As a software engineer, I've always cared a lot about how we can improve the process we have, how we can apply the best practices so we can improve the software we are delivering. So that's basically why I'm here to talk to you today about that. So let's start with a story. So this is a fictional story based on true facts. It will be a very quick one. Meet Alice. So Alice is a tech lead. She leads a team that has like a really good track of delivering things on time, and they are working on a big release that is coming up. She is very confident in the delivery. They are like a team that works really well together, so she's feeling really good about it. The team, as I mentioned, works really well together. They are agile. They work in sprints. They are a cross-functional team. So we have developers, BAs, business analysts, QAs, quality analysts, and designers, all working together on the same team. They are also like very confident in this delivery. It's coming up, so they are feeling very good about it. But 2 days before the release date, a bug is found. So a quality analyst was doing a validation on a specific feature, and they found a bug. So this bug is an accessibility bug. So this means that it's not related to the feature itself, but with this change, not all users would be able to actually use the system properly as they should. So obviously, this is a deal breaker. They cannot go live with this. So Alice takes it back to the team, and they try to figure out what to do now. So the team works really hard together. They work all night. They are trying to reproduce the issue, understand what exactly happened, how can they fix it, and after fixing, they need to validate, deploy, and it's a lot to do in 2 days, so they are not able to. They miss the deadline, and they are not able to deliver this in production as stakeholders were expecting. So yeah, now Alice has to deal with a lot of angry stakeholders, and no one is happy about that. So they start to wonder what went wrong here. They were pretty confident. They had like processes in place. They thought they had everything together, and then 2 days before the release date, they found out that this is not going to work. So basically, they held a post-mortem meeting to understand more about this issue. This meeting they usually held when there is like a production incident or something really big happens, and they need to understand how it happened, why it happened, and how they can avoid it from happening again. So they go back all the way in this meeting and try to understand more about this issue. And what they figured out, basically, is that the real issue here was the timing. So they were able to figure something out, like they were able to catch the issue before it went to production, so it didn't impact the users. But at the same time, it impacted their delivery. So it was not good. So they believe the issue here really was the timing. They had to have caught this earlier to be able to fix it in time and prevent it from happening after all. So thinking about that, we can start thinking what they could have done differently here, how they could have caught this issue earlier, have this feedback earlier, so they can fix it and even prevent it from happening at all in other environments, for example. So to think about that, we can start looking at the process that they currently have. So their current process is they have a business analyst on the team, and this person will write the story, will add all the details in, will write acceptance criteria, and once they believe it's good, it's ready for development. So a pair of development will pick it up, They work with pair programming. That's something that they enjoy, that they believe works well for the team. And this pair will pick it up, will work together on it, and once they believe it's good, it's dev complete, they will move it along. So once they move it, a quality analyst, a QA, will pick it up. So to validate the story, what they will do is they will deploy it to test environments, this change. They will run a set of automated tests that they have. That is a user journey type of tests. And they will do a lot of manual testing, testing different scenarios that they thought about, and also exploratory testing, trying to figure out other things that weren't thought about before. If everything is good, they will move it along. So this can be deployed to other environments and then released to production. But if there is an issue, what they will do is you go back to the pair of development. So that pair will try to reproduce the issue, try to fix it, and then if they believe it's dev complete again, they will move it to the QA. If everything is good, it will move along, but if not, it goes back to the developers. So there can be a lot of back and forth on this stage until they are able to figure out like everything and be able to move it along. So that's how it currently works. We can also take a look at how they currently integrate and deploy code. So what they do currently is they will work on the local environments. They work with pull requests, so they will open a pull request once they believe it's good to go. And this pull request will trigger a job that runs unit tests. That's something that they currently have on their code. If the unit tests pass, they are able to merge the code, and the build job will also run those unit tests. If the unit tests fail, the build will break, so they won't be able to build this artifact and use it. But if it passes, they will be able to have this artifact built, basically. So that's when a QA can come along and get this artifact, deploy to test environments, and then run the user journey test jobs as well. So they can get feedback on that, understand what's happening, and if needed, bring it back to the developers to go back to all the way to the local environment. So that's how it currently happens. They have some things in place there. They have unit tests. They have like QA person validating things. And that's how they currently integrate and deploy code. So thinking about that, this process and the code integration deployment, we can start thinking about what they could have done to catch those issues earlier, how they could have gotten quicker feedback. So we can start with thinking about different types of automations, other different types of tests that could be automated and inserted in that existing pipeline that would be able to catch different things earlier and basically give the feedback to the developers before even moving on to someone else to pick it up and look at it. So for example, they could take that job that currently runs unit tests and use that to run component tests, static code analysis, visual regression tests, which are all different kind of tests that will cover different things from the unit tests, and they could explore adding that in an automated way that would fail the build, not allow them to build this artifact if there is any issues on that side. Okay, good, that would already help us a little bit. But this could happen even earlier. If they have that pull request job already that they use, they could bring these tests all to this earlier stage, and it could run every time they push something to the pull request or update anything. And if anything fails, they are not even able to merge it. So they can get this feedback a little bit earlier and act on it before even integrating the code with the rest of the code. Okay, but they also have the local environment, right? So they could have some things even earlier. So on the local environment, they could have a pre-push hook. This means that every time they try to push code, we could run a set of tasks that would, if they pass, allow them to push the code, but if it fails, they wouldn't be able to even push the code. So we make sure that if there is an issue, it stays on the local environment, they are able to know right away and fix it before they are integrating it with anything else. So this is like really quick feedback. And here we could, for example, add linked, type check, unit tests, component tests. Those tests are really quick to run, those are validations, checks we have, really quick, really cheap, and give you this quick feedback. Here we would just want to avoid like running things that take a long time, because we want to be able to push things often and integrate code often. So if it takes a long time, it could have like the opposite effect of developers not wanting to push code. So let's just make sure we keep like just a set of quick tests and validations. These are all suggestions that they could do, things that they could improve. The types of tests would depend a lot on the project, on the team, and whatever works and brings value to this project. But these are examples of things that they could explore doing. And then what they could do as well is, now that they have all those automated tests in place, they could trigger automatically the deploy to test environment and automatically run the user journey tests. So this way, they would be able to have like a very much quicker feedback and be able to work on those issues and figure things out before moving along. So these are ways that they could change their quality gates, add more things. And of course, this would be just suggestions. It would depend a lot. So it doesn't mean that folks have to do everything here to have like good quality in place. But exploring some changes you can do and how you can bring these tests to an earlier stage would be able to help them already. And of course, devs, even though they have quality analysts in the team, devs should be writing the unit tests because they are working on the code, they know exactly what needs to be covered. And since they have quality analysts, not every team has, but since in this case they can pair on it. They can think about what types of tests would make more sense in which stage. They can communicate about it and start from there. And maybe even do test-driven development, like if folks are into that, it brings a lot of value. Like, would start with the tests, then you would develop the code itself and make sure that it passes that test. So this would be a way to build quality in the code. So it's a process change. Not everyone can get accustomed so quickly, but it's something that it's good to explore as well and see how the value it can bring to the team. Okay, we talked a lot about the code and things we can change in the quality gates we have and other types of changes more related to changes in code and pipeline. But it's not only about that. That's important. But we also need to think about the process. What we can change in the process that we currently have so we can improve and make sure that we are building quality. When we talk about changing process, we are basically talking about ways to have quick feedback and to show to the team that everyone has this shared accountability. So basically, shifting left, we want to have this very quick feedback, be able to prevent bugs from happening, and we want the whole team to know that everyone is accountable for quality. Regardless of the role they are in, it's not only the QA's responsibility. Everyone should have their own part on this and be able to contribute to build quality in. So we can start looking at the ways of working. What changes we could make that to improve that, have quick feedback and this shared accountability. We could start looking at agreements. So agreements would be, for example, the first one I bring here is the definition of ready. So we could have an agreement in the team about what is the definition of ready. So what is expected to have in a story before we are actually good to start working on it. So it would depend a lot on what the team believes is important. So that's why it's also an agreement. It's not the same definition of ready for every project. But basically, it could be, I need the stories to have acceptance criteria. Or if I'm working on something on the UI, I need the story to have the prototypes before I start working on it. So it depends a lot on what makes sense for the team and what they believe is important. But basically, we want to have that definition so we can avoid that back and forth, because I understood something needs to be made, and someone else understood something else. So with this definition, we can have this agreement between the team, and it can help a lot to clarify things. And similar to that, we can have an agreement on the definition of done. So the difference here is we need to know what is expected to have been implemented in the story, to have been validated, so we can actually consider the story done. So here we can avoid things like dev complete, or it's only missing the tests. So we can say that these and these and these types of tests are required for we consider the story to be actually done. So this is usually an agreement as well between the team. It can take different forms, but it's also very good to have because everyone has the same understanding about what is expected from that story. And you can use that as a checklist as well when developing, validating, and make sure that you remember what is needed for the definition of done. And once you have that, you can explore also improving to add different practices. For example, if you have a definition of ready, you could explore adding a kickoff meeting to each story. And I know no one wants to have like another meeting, but this is supposed to be really quick, like 10, 15 minutes. You can get together with different roles on the team, like developers that will work on the story, QA, BA, whatever makes sense for the story, depending on the roles on the team. And then you can use this meeting to talk about it, make sure it's meeting of the definition of ready, but also clarify any questions you have, any assumptions Because sometimes when we read something, we can understand it one way and someone else can understand it another. And we would only figure this out like when we are validating or more like in the next steps. So in this meeting, we can make sure everyone is on the same page before we start to actually work on the story. So it's supposed to be very quick, and it's very good for the team to be on the same page. And similar to that, once we have a definition of done, we can also explore adding a desk check meeting. So this would also be a very quick meeting, more towards like the end of development or during if you have any questions. But here you can take a look at the story to see what was implemented, how it was implemented, and make sure that it's meeting the definition of done that we talked about, and also make sure like everyone knows that it's meeting, like it's validating the right things, everything we talked about, make sure we are going on the right direction with that, and if anything is missing. So it's supposed to be very quick, but just to make sure as well everyone's on the same page about what was done. And in this meeting, it's also good if other developers can participate, if they didn't work on the story, because they can see what was implemented and how, and they can get context on it. So it's also a good way to avoid silos, where we have like just a pair that knows a lot about a feature, but never touched the other place of the code. So it's a good way for everyone to share context and know more about it with this quick meeting. And here as well, like not saying that all practices need to be implemented, but if depending on the maturity of the team and what already it has been working and what hasn't, you could explore adding like one agreement and see how that works for the team, see the value it brings. Or if you already have some agreements with the team, you could explore expanding to adding one of those practices and see as well how that's working and how we could aggregate value for this team and help them build this quality in. Okay, let me just drink some water. And we talked a lot about like different types of tests, different practices we can make, but not everything we need to test is so obvious. Not everything is so related to like the development of a domain functionality. So sometimes it gets a little trickier. For example, if we go back to the bug that was found on Alice's team, it was an accessibility bug. It wasn't related to the feature itself that was being built, but this affected the whole system overall. And like it could make that not all users would be able to use the system. So it was really impactful. But it wasn't directly related to the domain of the system. So this accessibility is what we call an architecture characteristic. So this can also be known as cross-functional requirements, non-functional requirements, quality attributes. There are a lot of different names. But in the book, Fundamentals of Software Architecture, they introduce this as architecture characteristics. So basically, we're talking about characteristics that can affect the whole system or the whole architecture. And they can take different forms. They can be like operational characteristics, cross-cutting, such as accessibility, which is affecting like the whole system, and also more related to the code itself. For example, maintainability can be one characteristic, and that's how well you can change the system, how easy it is to change it, to add new features in, so more related to the code itself, but important anyway. So there are different ones. There are like a big list of characteristics, just bringing some examples here, such as scalability, security, fault tolerance, how well the system continues to work when parts of it fail. So those things are very important, and depending on the project you are, some will be more important than others. And it's important to know that. All the teams should know that, should talk to stakeholders about it so you can understand which are the characteristics you should be caring about and thinking about them while you are developing the code. We can't think about all of them at the same time, because if you improve something, you can make something else worse. So it's important to know exactly which ones are the main ones that we should be caring about when working on the code. Okay, let's say we know what are the most important ones, like accessibility in this case, and we want to make sure we are being mindful of them, but how can we get early feedback on them? If it's not so simple as like a domain functionality where we can write a test to like check if this conditional is being followed or not, how can we get this early feedback and be able to prevent any issues from happening on this? So here we have the concept of fitness functions. So this was introduced in the book Building Evolutionary Architectures. And here we are talking about architecture fitness functions. We want to know, we think about that as a way to assess those quality attributes, those architectural characteristics, while we are making changes to the system or evolving the system. So they can be like guidelines guarding those architecture characteristics while the system is evolving. So in this way, we can get early feedback the same way we will do with other stuff and be able to prevent issues from happening and build quality in with those characteristics in mind. So if we go back to the accessibility one, we could add accessibility fitness functions. So there are libraries that we can use with existing test frameworks that can allow us to test for accessibility the same way we would do for other stuff, and add that to the pipeline, like to the existing test types we talked about, like unit tests, component tests, visual regression tests. They could use these libraries to test for accessibility and actually fail the pipeline, not allow the code to be integrated and merged and go to other environments if there is any issues there in an automated way without having to wait for someone else to validate or even to catch it in production. So the fitness functions will change a lot. They will depend a lot on the type of architecture characteristic we are talking about. Some will be harder to implement. You need to be more creative. Like accessibility has already frameworks that enables us to do that. But things like fault tolerance, like how do you do that? How do you integrate that to the pipeline, right? That's a bit more challenging. But in this example, you can also leverage the observability, the monitoring you have, and set up alerts that can notify you if there is anything on the system that is malfunctioning while it starts to happen, before it's actually like happening. And then you can act quick on that and get this quick feedback. So you can make this integrated and get this quick feedback. So it depends a lot on the type. You can get very creative here and see what makes more sense. But basically, when we talk about fitness functions, we are talking about that, like being able to have this quick feedback on those characteristics as well. So everything we talked about here, we are basically seeing a way of having this shift left testing because we want to have more quality gates earlier in the process and being able to have this quick feedback, have this like really early feedback and be able to act on it and prevent the bugs from going in the system instead of having to like run after them to catch them afterwards. But doing all of that takes time, right? Like, how can we stop features developing if we're going at full speed and focus on adding different types of tests, making changes to the pipeline, adding more meetings? Like, how do we convince people to do that? How can we convince the team and the stakeholders to implement shift left testing if that's going to take time? And we know that it will actually enable us to have more speed because if we have all that in place, we can develop things, make change more quickly, and deliver things more quickly. But if we are saying to people, we will stop developing like so fast to do other things, most of the time it's a bit hard to convince. But the first thing I would say is don't try to do everything at the same time. If we try to make a lot of changes at different tests, different processes at the same time, it will probably be very confusing for the team and it can cause like more friction than actually help. So I would start with making one change, trying to see what will bring more value, what will make you have this quick feedback in a most important way for you, for your team, and start with that one change. And once you do that, you need to measure it. Each change should be measured. You should know like how was the system before the change and how the system is after the change, so we can see the value that was added and also show that value to others, right? It's a way to show to people like this is working, we can continue doing this, we can find new ways to improve this as well. So to do that, we need to have metrics, right? We need to see like what metrics we can use. And there are tons of metrics. It can depend a lot on the project itself. Depending on the domain, some of the metrics might be more important. I don't know if you work for e-commerce, maybe it's the number of orders you have. So it depends a lot. But these 4 key metrics are very known, and they are usually affected when you build quality. So for example, if you are building quality, if you have a lot of automated testing in place, a lot of processes that allow you to catch things earlier, you will be able to deploy more often to production because you have a lot of confidence on what you are doing. You don't need to wait for so many validations and maybe risk something. This way, you know exactly that you are pretty sure that you have confidence that things are working. So you can deploy frequently. So you are delivering value to production frequently. The time to market is quicker. So that's a metric that you can see this value. And the lead time for change as well, because you have all the right things in place, you can implement things more quickly once you get used to that, and you can add new things more quickly to the code as well, so that metric is also impacted. And time to restart, if you have the right fitness functions in place, you can see exactly when the system is misbehaving and go back and do something about it, roll back if needed, so you can act really quickly and the time to restore is like lower. And change failure rate, similar to the deployment frequency. If you are deploying more often, you have more confidence and you are deploying less things each time because it's happening all the time. So the change failure rate will be smaller as well because less issues would be happening when you deploy the code. And my favorite metric is having less production instance. Because basically no one likes to wake up in the middle of the night to solve an issue in production. So if you are building quality in, you are able to do all these things. One side effect will be that you would have less production incidents. So the whole team would be happy about that, I'm pretty sure. So basically what we talked about here, we can summarize on what we need to do, what we could do to build quality in and shift left. We can start with identifying an issue. So in this case, we saw there was an accessibility issue and we moved on from there. After that, we can review the path to production. So we can think about what's happening right now. How are we integrating code? How are we deploying? What are the processes that we have? And just making sure we can map that out and everyone has a good understanding about what's happening. Then after that, we can start by identifying possible quality gate changes. So what changes can I make? What tests can I add? Where can I add them? Could I do that earlier? Could I get this feedback earlier than we are having right now? So starting to identify changes that could happen in that area. And then we could go with identifying possible process changes. So as we talked about, maybe having different agreements. Maybe if we already have that, explore adding different practices. So what changes can we do in our process that could help us have this quick feedback and make sure we have shared accountability? And once we know that, once we know changes that we can make, we can start with implementing one change because we don't want to change everything at the same time. So taking a look at that, we can think about what are the things there that can bring us the most value. What is maybe the one that will take less effort, but will already add value to the team. So we can start with choosing that one and implementing that change. And once we do that, we can measure it. So as we talked about, we can choose the metrics that makes the most sense to our project and measure it before we make the change and after we make the change. So we can see exactly the value that was added and we can also show that to others. And after that, we start over. So this is like a cyclic process. We want to make sure it's happening all the time. We are talking about it, the team is talking about it, and making sure we can make changes and adapt things and experiment things. Maybe we add some process and that doesn't work, and that's okay. At least we tried something and we saw that it didn't bring value. So this can happen all the time. We can test different things and start seeing what makes more sense for the project, what will change those metrics, what will help us build this quality in. So with those changes, we basically want to foster a culture of building quality in with the team, making sure that, keeping in mind, we want to have the quick feedback and the shared accountability. Everyone on the team needs to know they are responsible for quality as well. If we have quality analysts, they are like the champion for quality, they know more, they are the experts, but everyone has their role in it, and they should participate and add their ideas in, add their opinions in, so we can together bring more quality and build this quality within the project we are building. And that was what I wanted to share with you folks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Thayse. It was a fantastic speech. And now use your thumbs and all the available fingers to type some questions as we are going into the Slido. And here is some small memorabilia for you from Budapest. Now you remember what's the main landmark looking like. That's the parliament. Yay. And there's your portrait. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. We have questions. As usual, if you're lazy, I will come with you with a microphone to you. I need some movement. So, oopsala. Don't lose your belongings. You mentioned type checking. Do you think teams using strongly typed languages make higher quality code?
That's a good question. I wouldn't say like higher quality code. It doesn't mean that because you're using like strongly typed language, you are building quality in. But it's a way that for most teams, it helps. You can avoid making mistakes that could be caught like after, like only when you are running the application, you would see like an error happening, for example. So you can catch those things earlier. And for most teams, they find it helpful. But yeah, it doesn't mean that just because you have like a strongly typed language, you have higher quality code. I wouldn't say that.
Thank you so much. Are having 2 meetings per story, kickoff and desk check, and defining small story slices at the same time conflicting goals?
I don't see it as conflicting goals. I think one thing actually improves the other. Like if you are defining small story slices, that's great, and you can make like small PRs and integrate code frequently. But at the same time, you can have like these quick meetings, and it will actually make the meetings quicker because like there is a small scope of the story, and you are able to ask questions and clarify any assumptions you have. So I think it's actually very helpful for those meetings to have like small story slices, smaller scope to work on, and it's easier for everyone to understand and be on the same page.
All right, thank you very much. From the experience of your team, which changes to the process brought the most value?
That's a good question as well. It depends a lot. I've been in very different teams. Some teams have different roles. Some teams were only developers. So we need to like have a very cross-functional team like playing different roles. But what really helps, regardless of the process we are doing, is talking about it. Like setting some time when we're talking about a story, for example, having definitions, having those agreements. I think it's like a base for us to expand to other things. So I would say the agreements really improve. Depending on the team, like adding the practices, like having those quick meetings also help a lot. It's really helpful to avoid that back and forth, like making sure that everyone's on the same page. Because I see like what happens a lot is that you start a story, you read something, you interpret it in your own way, and after like it's going to validation or someone else like a stakeholder doing sign off, they had understood things completely differently. So just taking the time before we start something to look at that together and make sure everyone is on the same page helps a lot. And also making those changes, like making sure you can run tests earlier, like if possible, use those prep push hooks as quick as possible. Having those early feedback as well really helps.
All right, thank you. We have 2 questions. What do you think, how it is possible to teach this process quickly to a team? Smiley face.
That's okay. I'm not sure like how we can teach like quickly, but I think if we can start talking about it with the team, like talking about the benefits, talking about different things you can try, and making sure that the whole team understands what we are trying to do here, and how you can, what changes would make sense. And basically, I think it really helps to have that map, like having everyone on the team knowing your path to production, because it's surprising how many times teams don't know like how the code gets merged, how the code gets deployed. So making sure everyone is aware of those things already helps, and then you can start talking with the team to start thinking about ways, and also like the metrics, because it really helps to show the value about what we are doing, and so everyone can see that as well. Not just like we know it's going to improve, but we can actually have numbers to prove it.
Thank you. Next one is a heart. Do you know how to make the Gen Z heart like this? I tried so hard. There you go. Thank you for the heart. What do QA people do if you have shifted quality left? They chill and they make fun of you developers. That's what they do.
They are less stressed. No, this is really good. Basically, I see a lot the QA role changing for being like the person that is responsible for quality and that needs to run after everyone and make sure everything is getting validated, to the person that is a champion for quality. They are responsible for, they are like the most experienced people with quality. They know the different types of tests. They can add in the value to everyone, like on these meetings and bringing in their own ideas. And they are like the experts in it. So they can be a champion. They can remind the team about what needs to be done, what different types of tests can be done, what different process as well. So being the person that leads the quality within the team. But yeah, keeping in mind that everyone else should participate on it.
All right, thank you very much. That's all the questions we have for today. Give a warm hand to Thayse. Yay!
Thank you very much.